Hey students, in this video I wanted to go over something called net present value. I also wanted to go over something called internal rate of return, and then I wanted to talk about something called payback period and simple rate of return. You know, the idea in time value of money is, as you already know, a dollar today is worth more to you. If you got to wait and get it in the future, then it's worth less. You have to kind of devalue it because you got to wait to get it. So we've been talking about time value of money. We've looked at some examples. We've looked at how to do loans, which is all time value of money. But there's another area called capital budgeting. It's how you decide whether it's a good idea to invest money right now or should you wait. So that's the idea of this, and I wanted to show you how to do this and to give you an example. I've also got a homework for the week that you need to replicate as well, which matches this. So let's dive in and take a look at these concepts. All right, first thing is, when we're looking at this, you can see, and I'll try to keep following along with you here, you can see we have a capital budgeting decision, which means we have an investment cost. And so is it a good idea to budget for this $95,000 to get 90 commercial bred heifers started? Now, to do this, we have to buy them at first. So there's a couple of ways to buy them. We could actually borrow the money, or we could just pay outright in cash. And that's what I'm doing in my example here. Borrowing will be something we'll add to this, but for right now, this is what we're going to do. So this is a time value of money thing because you're today, so I always start out at time value 0, and I make this column. You'll want to do the same. And so you're going to start off at time value 0, and there is no cash flow. We don't get any money back. There's nothing to sell. We're not reselling them yet. We're actually paying out $95,000. And so this, I'm going to double click on it, is actually just a negative reference to what you pay up front. So that's how you end up with $95,000. When you do capital budgeting, you typically always start out with money out that you have to lay out. So that's what this is. Now, to do capital budgeting, you also have to estimate over the time period what happens. And so what's happening here is basically we are getting a set of commercial heifers. We buy them, 90 head. They are making us about $18,000, $22,000, $25,000. You can see what they're making us each year. Now, I just gave you the simple net. So there's a revenue, there's minus an expense, and that's what we have here. And it's cash, so we're not paying attention to depreciation or anything like that. It's just simply money we brought in minus the money we had to take out to get that done, and the rest is right here. So we're estimating that we'll probably make about $18,000. They're all going to be first calf heifers, so they won't wean as well, they won't produce as well. It looks like the next year they're better, next year they're better. Then they start falling off a bit. Maybe we have some losses in there. And so after that year, we're going to actually get them sold, all cull them, and they'll bring us $35,000 is our estimate for that. So the idea is what is the value that we get each year? And so really you just do this total net cash column. So first of all, it's equal to what we pay out. This is going to be just equal to what we bring in. And so we bring in the same each year. So it's pretty simple. There's no expenses to deduct. Now here in this last year, what I had to do was say, okay, we weaned that last set. Those probably all didn't take, so we have this really low estimate of what we might bring, but we're going to sell them, we think, for $35,000. So actually in that 9th year, we'll bring back $43,000. So the question is this a good idea? Well, let me just talk about a little bit about cash flow and budgeting. Sometimes we just look at what we bring back in. So let me just show you that. So if I just sum up these values here, not including what I pay out, I'll get $200,000. So you're like, man, this is easy. I only pay out 95 and I get 200,000 back. Now the problem with that is we realize that these dollars aren't today's money. They're out in the future. So that's why that's just not the way you could do this. There's really 3 ways to analyze a capital budget. Now, I'm going to show you the best way up front, and that's going to be something called net present value. And it also helps us create something called internal rate of return. So that's what these two values are. Sometimes people ask that they don't really understand net present value, so they talk about, well, when am I going to get my money back? That's called payback period. That's not a bad way, but it has some limitations. The other is just simple rate of return. Just I get back so much money and it costs me so much. What's that rate? Now that ignores time value of money. And so these are not as good, but they are commonly used. So I want to go over all three: net present value, payback period, and simple rate of return. How do those work? All right, now you've already understood, you've already understood the concept of present value. We've been looking at that. But net present value, all it is the present value of all that money minus the cost. That is net present value. Now you could do it one at a time. So for example, you could say, let me just do it right quick. Well, and the other thing is we've got risk adjustment. So 9% is the required rate of return. That's what we need to get. So that serves as our discount rate. So once again, just like we talked about in class when we were face-to-face, you need three things to do time value of money. You need the money, you need the time, and you need the rate. And we have all three. So if I press equals, for example, and just do simple present value, remember I've got to put equals, a negative in front of PV. Remember we want to adjust that. All right, so what's the rate? The rate's 9%, comma, what's the time? It's 1 year, comma, what is the future value? And it's right there. In 1 year, that's what it'll bring. So if I press enter, 18,000's only worth $16,000 in today's terms, present value. Now, if I did that, kept doing it over and over and over, of course, equals, you don't have to discount that at all because you're paying that out right now. So $95,000 paid right now is $95,000. But if you got to wait a year, $18,000 is only $16,000. If you have to wait 2 years, $22,500 is not $22,500, it's less. And so you keep doing these and add them up. You could do that, but it's really easier just to do it all at once. So for example, what we do is we come down here and we do it all at once. So if I press equals NPV, open parentheses, I can do this all at one time. So first thing it asks me for is the rate. Well, the rate is 9%, comma. Now it starts to ask me about the values. Now this is very important. Notice how it says value 1, 2, 3. It keeps going. You really only want to start with the item 1 all the way through the end. So we've already got the net cash flows for 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 9. So I just highlight them and I close parentheses. Now here's the other important spot. We've got to consider what we paid up front. It's got no need to be adjusted. So you just hit plus and just add that negative 95,000. So here's the question. Are all of these inflows of cash in today's value, that's the NPV part, the present value part, are all of those worth more than the 95,000? And if the answer is positive, which it is, then that means this is a good decision. And so net present value for this investment is $35,000 above what you had to pay, as well as above discounting at 9%. Now, if you said, hey, this is even riskier than I thought, I'm going to discount that I'm going to change that to 12%. What's it going to do to net present value? It's going to make it even lower, but it's still positive. So it's still a good idea. So this was 9%. I'll leave that as 35,000. So in the questions below I have for you that you'll fill out, you're going to press equals and just say, well, it's 35,000. And that's going to be a good idea. Now, what is internal rate of return? Internal rate of return is trying to say, well, you wanted it to earn you 9%, but the money that comes back in is actually more than the cost and the discount rate. So what are we actually getting out of this? And that's called internal rate of return. All you do, it's really simple. Press equals IRR, and it's going to do it for you. You start the parentheses, and notice it says just values. That's because it wants that first one. It wants the time value 0. Today you spent $95,000 and it brought you back all these values. And so you can just simply close parentheses. And actually, this thing is earning us 17%. So if it's positive, doesn't matter if it's positive by like $5. If it's positive, it's a good idea. And if it's positive, the rate is greater than the discount rate that you require. And in this case, we know that's the truth. Now, if I have an internal rate of return of 17%, if this is super risky and I say, man, it's got to give me 25% or I'm not doing it, you're about to drive net present value to less than zero, negative. And that's not a good decision. That means the 95,000 in this rate make this not a good idea. Now, I knew it was going to be negative because I know it's earning 17. So if I require it to earn 25%, it won't work. But that's really crazy. 9% is a good requirement, pretty high. So this still looks like a good idea. So that's the idea of net present value and internal rate of return. Is it a good decision or not? The answer is yes. Now, what about payback period and simple rate of return? Payback period is just simply trying to figure out in year one, I'm going to start right there, equals, I had to pay 95,000 out, but plus in year one, I get 18 back. So now I'm only 77 short. So the next one is going to be, well, I'm 77 short, plus I get 22.5 back. Now I'm 54 short, equals, now I take 54 short, and I'm getting now 25,000 back. Now I'm 29.5 short, equals, I get now 21,000. So now I'm only 8,500 short. Now I'm going to pause because if I do the next one, I get 20,000. So if I press equals and I am 8,500 short divided by what I'm going to get 20,000. I only need 0.43 of that year. So actually the payback period is 4.43. Now I got that by looking at the year that I get my money. Almost done. Almost done. I'm almost done in year 4. I only need 8,500 of the 21,000. So I only need, I only need 8,500 of that 21. So that's actually 0.4. So 4.4 years is what I am getting. So that's when I get my money back. That also looks pretty good. I get my money back here in the middle, so some people would like that. However, payback period does not account for risk at all. It's actually saying that 25,000 is just as good as that 18,000. That's really not the case. So what's the limitation of payback period? The limitation is does not factor risk at all, or time. That's the equal to risk. All right, simple rate of return is another concept used. It's commonly used. Payback period's not bad, but if you're trying to compare two investments, then maybe payback period helps you. Simple rate of return is another approach. So simple rate of return says, well, just what's the average return? I don't care when I get it. So I'm going to do this by just doing equals average. And I'm going to go grab all of those years that I get money back. And I'm going to press enter. So on average, year 1 only gives you 18. Year 2 gives you 22.5. Year 3 gives you 25. Year 4 gives you 21. So the average across all the years is 22,000. The cost equals, just go grab the 95,000 I got to pay up front. And so on average, I get 23% return. Now, simple rate of return has got more problems. It does not factor risk, and does not factor timing of the money. The idea with this one, let me see if I can make these show up for you a little better. Yeah, the idea of this payback period, it doesn't really account for time. Let me back out of that. It's not really about time. It does. It tells you the years. But it does not account for risk. Simple rate of return does not account for risk either, and it also doesn't account for time. If you got $0 here and $0 here and $0 here, but you got all that total came into here, you could have the same average, but for the first 3 years, you're not going to get any money back. So do you have the extra cash to float this deal? So simple rate of return's got really a double whammy of problems, and this gets calculated quite a bit, and it's just really a poor decision tool. Payback period, a little bit better. It talks about time, so you do have that. It doesn't account for risk. The best decision tool is net present value, and that's how it's calculated. Now you've got a spreadsheet in your week that's the same as this, so I've just done the work and showed you how to do it. Now it's up to you to get the work done yourself using formulas just like I did. So try to follow along in my video and get that work done and turn it in. That way you can see how this works. Next week we will do more of this, but we'll talk about loans, and so that'll be an additional twist. Thanks.